This is our second video in Shogun Japan unit. Last video, we talked about the heavy influence of Chinese culture on Japan. The role of the emperor in Heian Japan originally followed the Chinese model, with the emperor holding complete power over the centralized state. As the Heian era progressed, however, the emperor became more of a symbolic and ceremonial figure rather than one with real political power. This shift occurred largely due to the idea that because the emperor was divine, he should not be bothered with ordinary things, such as day to day governing. Consequently, real power came to be held by powerful aristocratic families. The move to Heian signified the beginning of a more distinctive Japanese culture. Although the Chinese language remained dominant in education and government, the Chinese characters were adopted into a Japanese script, which was often used by women at court. One such woman, Lady Murasaki Shikibu, wrote the world's first novel, The Tale of the Gyurgi, which tells the story of the life of and loves of a prince. As real power shifted away from the emperor, his court became more focused on elaborate rituals and ceremonies. The Japanese created a new system of etiquette and language unique to the Heian court. In Heian society, Japanese peasants worked the land and provided the taxes, mostly in the form of textiles and rice. A hereditary aristocracy dominated local areas in much the same way that the Uji had exerted influence earlier. The powerful aristocratic families in the emperor's court wielded the power of the centralized government. During the Heian period, more and more land became consolidated in the hands of a relatively small number of families. These powerful families were exempt from taxes, as were Buddhist and Shinto monasteries. Consequently, the tax burden fell increasingly on the peasants. Private estates, called shogun, developed as aristocratic families came to control more and more land. These shogun were not single blocks of land like those found in Europe during the feudal period. Instead, the wealthy would seize scattered pieces of land when they could, and then would get peasants to work the land under the supervision of a manager. Shogun came to comprise the majority of agricultural land in Japan and were passed down within families. The families controlling the shogun also increasingly began to act independently from the Heian government. Aristocratic families like the Fujiwara and Taira controlled the government council and of state, and organized armies that relied largely on mounted cavalry. Originally, the military answered only to the emperor, but during the mid-Heian period, government armies composed of samurai, meaning servants, were converted into private armies of the Japanese aristocracy. Shogun also developed their own private armies, recruiting men to help defend and expand their estates. These private armies formed the backbone of the Japanese military for nearly 1,000 years. The early samurai were not the stylish, educated samurai depicted in films and television shows. Rather, they were largely illiterate, recruited from the lower classes, and trained to destroy an opposing army. The samurai of legend and history originated from the Tokugawa shogunate in the 17th century. The samurai were mounted warriors who carried a wide variety of weapons, such as bows and arrows, short swords, and long swords with a curved blade. The contending armies of the different aristocratic families came to exert more and more influence, further weakening the power and position of the emperor and the centralized government. The armies also made it possible for aristocratic families to wield more power. In addition to the samurai, feudal warriors, called Bushi, which means warrior, also arose. They came from aristocratic families and served as both military and political leaders in defending the shogun against attacks from other families. The Bushi warriors were similar to European knights and even had a code of honor known as Bushido that was very much like the Europeans' knight code of chivalry. The following quote by the famous warlord Imigawa Ryoshun illustrates the aims and ethics of Bushido. In governing the country, it is dangerous to lack even one of the virtues of humanity, righteousness, etiquette, and wisdom. It is forbidden to forget the great debt of kindness one owes to his master and ancestors, and thereby make light of the virtues of loyalty and filial piety. There is a primary need to distinguish loyalty from disloyalty and to establish rewards and punishments. Just as Buddha preached the various laws in order to save all living beings, one must rack one's brains and never depart from the way of the warrior. One of the most well known aspects of Bushido is seppuku, a ritual suicide committed to restore honor. As the Heian period wore on, the emperor's power continued to weaken, and he became more and more of a symbolic figure rather than a political leader. Politics had become increasingly dominated by the aristocratic families, and the emperor no longer governed the country. In addition, the central government stopped trying to exert its influence anywhere outside the capital area. As a result, Japan quickly spiraled toward feudalism and a decentralized government. The Japanese aristocracy had accumulated large tracts of land and private armies. Consequently, power shifted to the local elites in the countryside. Two families came to control much of Japan: the Taira and their mortal enemies, the Miyamoto. The two battled in the 11th century in the Genpei Wars, when the Miyamoto emerged victorious. They claimed to rule Japan in the emperor's name and installed their clan leader as military governor, or shogun. After taking power, the Miyamoto executed every member of the Taira clan. So now we know the word shogun means military governor. These are the discussion questions in Google form.